the most important step of owning any of our machines here is maintenance. Whether it be with our gear system internally or the individual parts itself, or you're looking to troubleshoot something as big as the frame itself, or simply the tank itself. Here's how to do it all. The first step in diagnosing the problem in any of our machines is knowing what to look for. Here we have an SV15, one of our 15-liter sausage stuffing machines. Of course, the tank's not in place right now, and that's because of this little issue right here. It was returned because of a little noise internally. Now, it may seem like it goes up and down smoothly, but there is a certain grinding noise internally inside of here. And when said pressure is applied to, let's say, whatever material you're using, especially if it's a thicker material, then that's going to cause a lot of problems. For example, one problem it may cause is bowing of the frames. Each side frame can only handle so much pressure before it starts to bow. Now, that's not to say it's going to bow with any little, material you have when making sausages or churros, but it's something to consider, not to overload the tank and the machine itself. Here we have a gear system that is a little too worn out. This is what it looks like up close. Along the track, be right here, the big gear would grind on the small gear shaft, causing a slower repetition of the crank, or causing it to seize up entirely, which is no good. Take this gear system apart. All you would need to do is unscrew screws number 1, 2, and 3, along with this bolt right here on the side. After that, the gear shafts will be easy to remove, along with the sprocket. This right here. Alright then, let's get started. We'll start by taking off screw number 1. Alright, screw number 1 done. After unscrewing screw number 1, one thing that you should look out for, I forgot to mention, is there is a ratcheting system right here, and that's what this metal disc is. There is a ball bearing held on by a spring, and when screw number 1 is removed, the ball bearing becomes loose, along with the ratchet disc. There's no problem you should worry about. Just keep that in mind. Now, let's move on to screw number 2. All right, screw number 2 is done. Let's move on to screw number 3. All right, screw number 3 is done. Put that down there. Put this to the side. After all these screws are removed, we start by removing the small gear shaft right here. Alright, so let's put this off to the side now, and let's get back to the main party, which should be the big gear shaft and the big gear itself. Before we get there, we'd have to remove the bolt on the side. And to do that, we'd need a 15mm socket tool. All we need to do is to unscrew it out. Just like so. Now that the side bolt has been removed, you can place the ratchet disc somewhere to the side so we can get back to the big gear shaft itself. Grab this little washer along with the bolt And the little ball bearing, place it off to the side. Make sure not to lose any of the pieces. So now, this is where the real fun begins, so pay close attention. In order to remove the big gear shaft, along with the big gear itself, we need a little more force because the big gear is fitted onto the big gear shaft. And what I mean is there is a small sheave on the gear shaft itself, pretty much a hotkey, you would say, preventing the big gear from sliding out. So now, to remedy this, I recommend using a mallet. All right, like so. This is the big gear, and this is the big gear shaft itself. Then bring back small gear shafts to show. And this is the little hotkey I'm referring to, the little shim right here. It would be placed right here, along with this indent right here on the big gear. Now, with this in place, this little baby ain't going anywhere. So, that in mind, you would need a little bit of force to take it out. But as you can see, I did it, so can you. Now, let's get rid of these because, like I said, these are no good. This, however, appears to be in good shape, and the housing itself does too. All we need to do is to clean it up a little bit, which we'll get to right now. After getting everything settled and clean, this is what a clean gear housing should look like. Long with the ratchet disc and the big gear itself. And 2 new gear shafts. So to get started, all we need to do is take hold of the shim along with the big gear shaft and put it back from where it came from. Now, this would be the tricky part because along with the shim right here, once it's placed, you'd need to back it out and place the big gear itself back inside. Once it's in position, try to find an indent to lock in with the shim itself. Just like this, a nice tight fit. Ensuring that it is flush on the side right here where the bolt goes. That way, the ratcheting disc can fit smooth and flush. Press down on the ball bearing. And to get to that, all we need is the spring and the ball bearing itself. Place the spring back into the hole right here, into the ratcheting mechanism. As for the ball bearing, hold off on that for now. Can't get too ahead of ourselves. And come back by grabbing the small gear shaft, placing it back into the drive. This in place, we can go ahead and start to screw back screw number 3. Now, screw number 3 out of the way, we start by putting screw number 2 back into place. You may have noticed, we are going backwards here. Just like so. Now, onto screw number 1. Alright, so once we get screw number 1 settled in place, we can move on to the ratcheting system. And to do that, we start by grabbing the bolt along with the washer and placing it indent side out, meaning perforations have to be in the inside and the indents have to pop outwards. That way, we can ensure that the ball bearing collides with the perforations, making the ratcheting noise we all know and love. Take the other washer and sandwich it in between the ratchet disc and the bolts. That way, we can hand tighten the bolt onto the gear shaft itself. Now, here's where it gets really tricky. Before it is tightened, make sure there's a gap big enough to place the ball bearing back into the spring hole right here and the ratchet disc itself. All right, let's go. All right, and once you got it in place, all you need to do is hand tighten the bolts. Now, I say hand tighten because you will need a tool to tighten this down further. Now, finally, once you've tightened everything down, have everything back in place, this is what it should look like. And let's test it out. 1, 2, and 3. There we go. It's a bit tight, but that's because everything should be brand new and in place and not worn out, which is a bad thing. Don't be alarmed, just a new day. Still me. I'm gonna move on here today right now on a couple of common issues with the tank. It's not too many, but now that I've seen them, I know what to do and how to deal with them. So it shouldn't be too hard as long as I'm here. So on the side of these tanks, there should be 4 ears for the sidewall bolts. On the top 2, there are lever springs, which should look a little like this in the close-up. So here we have 7-liter sausage stuffer tank. We're going to demonstrate a common issue that I was referring to earlier, which is right here. On this ear, mind you, the tank is upside down, so this would be the top. The top 2 ears have what's called a lever spring, which is a piece of thin metal strip bent to in a way where it can allow spring effect, pretty much. Now, the issue lies with right here. Sometimes this gets a little too worn out because the bolt on the sidewall just wears it out over time, going in and out, in and out, in and out. So imagine like a spring over time, it just gets stretched out. And in this case, it gets pushed back inside too far, making the ear a little bit too loose for the bolts. Now, here's what it looks like on the other side. In order to fix this issue, you'd have to get something of this nature, something that can fit underneath the little lever spring right here, or inside right here. All you would need to do is pretty much push down on the lever spring from the inside right here. Pretty much popping it out, making it tighter. and on this side as well. Just like so. There we go. Now, when placed back onto the sausage stuffer, it should ensure a tighter fit. Now, last but not least, we're going to tackle the most tedious task of this machine here, which is opening up this casing and replacing one of the gear shafts. But before we do all that, we must show how to even get to that point. Now, first we start by unscrewing the plunger plate. Even this in itself has a slew of problems right here. So you can see this being returned. First and foremost, this Allen wrench screw right here, this bolt is supposed to be right here on the plate. Securely tight on. The reason I say that is because another common issue would be if it gets stuck right here, you'd have to clamp it off with something with a grip, therefore ruining the threads on the bolt. And this is what the plunger plate looks like up close. So this is our 10, 12, 15 liter sausage stuffer plunger plate. Here are some of its features. This is the gasket I was referring to. And this is the pressure release valve. And this is the Allen wrench stud. This is how to assemble the plunger plate. First, you start off by putting back Allen key bolt. There you go. Grab the air release spring, put it on the stud, place it on underneath, make sure it is flush. You grab the screw along with the washer, make sure the washer is on the screw. That way the screw doesn't slip through the air release valve. Now remember, the tighter it is, the more pressure there is. The looser it is, the less pressure there will be inside the tank. Meaning it will be a smoother flow for thicker materials if it is looser. Now, to put this on, like I said, ensure that the lip is facing upward, going this way. That's how it should look. Next step would be removing the rack. To do that, it's fairly simple. All you need to do is crank it down all the way. And once we get to bottom position right here, lower, a little bit lower, it will simply fall out and you can slide it out like that. Like so. And this is what it will look like. This is for the 15 liter sausage stuffer machine gun. Put this to the side too. Now, The next step would to be remove the handle right here. And to do that would be as simple as unscrewing the butterfly screw we talked about earlier in our series. And once we have that off, just put it to the side. Now, we can get to the casing. Getting inside the machine should not be hard at all, as there's 3 simple steps. We should be removing the screws on the side, 2 bolts on each side, and the 4 screws underneath on the faceplate. To get started, start by removing 4 screws on each side, which holds the cover box. Now, we get to the other side. That out the way, get to step number 2. Should be removing face cover underneath. And to do that, it's 4 simple screws, 1 on each corner. Now, let's clean up our mess by collecting the screws. So now that we have all 8 screws removed from both sides, we can remove the cover box, which should be easy, just like this. This we can put off to the side. And this should be the gear system. Let's turn it around. Right here. Now, to remove this, all we need to do is to do step number 3, which is to remove 2 bolts on each side. So 4 total. Now, this last bolt, we should be very careful and hold on to the gear system itself, as it will become loose once the bolts are removed. And you can put this off to the side, right over here. With the old gear system removed, we're left with the bare frame, and we can finally install the new gear system into place, which looks just like this. To correctly install this gear system, we need to ensure that the big gear shaft along with the big gear is on top and the small gear shaft is on the bottom right here. And with that in mind, start by placing it into the sidewall. Grab one of those side bolts and install it. Hold it up to make sure it is in place for every other thing. And the method I like doing is I take the top bolt and install it first. I take one bolt on the other side, install it on the bottom, kind of alternating. Now, I take another bolt, put this one in the bottom, again, alternating. Finally, last bolt right here. It should be on top of this side. Now, with the bolts hand tightened, we should tighten it with our tool. Now, this is what we should be left with. It's time to put back the housing. The logo facing out this way, and the drive shafts on the right hand side facing towards you, you should put back the housing this way. And with the housing in place, we install the 8 screws back onto the housing frame, 4 on each side. Now, with those screws in place, we move on to the face cover underneath. Start by grabbing one of the 4 screws, hand tightening it onto casing. Move on by tightening it with a screwdriver. There we go. Just like so. And now this SV15, which was once returned because of a damaged gear system, it's one step closer to becoming brand new again. All we need to do is to reinstall the rack, which we do by making sure the logo is facing you and the teeth of the rack are facing away. And we install by reinserting from the bottom hole right here, the casing. Now with a little pressure, it should click up once again. Just like so. And we take the handle back, put it into the drive shaft. Just like so. And we start to crank it up. And it's working fine. That concludes everything for today. Stay tuned for next time, where we will showcase another one of our great machines, the FME Meat Mixer lineup.